What if one day could open your heart, spark your spirit, and connect you to your most authentic self? That day is Saturday, August 23rd from 10 to 6 at the Litz Rock Shops Woo Woo Festival at the Taylors Falls Memorial Community Center, located at 312 Government Street in Taylors Falls. Explore tarot, oracle, psychic, and mediumship readings. Listen to inspiring speakers covering fascinating metaphysical topics. Soak in the calm tones of live hand pan music. Shop handcrafted goods, crystals, metaphysical tools, books, and more. It's just $5 cash at the door as a free will offering. And remember, Taylors Falls is a destination. Come out for the festival and stay to explore the natural beauty, historic charm, and energy of this incredible town. And yes, there will be walking tacos.
The Let's Rock Shops Woo Woo Festival, Saturday, August 23rd from 10 to 6 at 312 Government Street, Taylors Falls Memorial Community Center. Just $5 at the door. Come for the woo, stay for the wonder, and the walking tacos.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host, guest, random reptoid, or chupacabra may not necessarily reflect those of AM 950 Radio, its affiliates, or its sponsors. Now, it's time to step into the unknown. There are things people experience but never talk about. A shadow moving in the corner, flickering of the lights, a disembodied voice. We invite you to talk with us. Share your story, share your experience, because this isn't just your story, this is our story. This is GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun.
And this is GhostBox Radio on AM 950, where every night we talk about the paranormal, ufology, Bigfoot, and so much more. My name is Greg Bakun. Thank you very much for joining us on this Tuesday evening. Very happy to have you with us tonight. I think we're going to get right to it tonight, because who doesn't like lighthouses, or at least at the very least is always been interested. I mean, I know living in Minnesota and driving up north and going around to the Great Lakes and to other areas, going into Wisconsin as well, you run into, you see lighthouses at the very least. And to me, they're very mysterious. To me, they're very interesting. And the purpose of them is I don't know, it's so important, but it was so, I don't know, there's something so cool about them. I love them. And I was very excited to get Dianna having her books come my way. She sent them to me. We talked about having her on the show, and I'm very excited. Tonight we're going to be talking about her book that came out in 2022, Death and Lighthouses on the Great Lakes, A History of Murder and Misfortune. And very happy to have the author with us tonight, Dianna Stampfler. Dianna, how are you doing? Welcome to GhostBox Radio.
Well, thank you for having me, and thanks for the lighthouse love. Growing up in the Great Lakes, you kind of are, I think, destined to be fascinated with lighthouses.
It's a really good point, especially if for myself, speaking solely for myself here, I didn't live by them. We'd have to travel, and we would see them on our travels, and Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. I think all the states are beautiful, but those in particular are absolutely wonderful. Just sightseeing, driving, sort of ways to pass time. Then maybe running across a lighthouse is really really something. I know that, like you said, being up in this area, you're going to see them, you're going to have some love, but your love for lighthouses goes a little bit further, doesn't it?
It does. And I grew up in the kind of the middle part of the state of Michigan. Mm-hmm. I had to go 45 minutes to see a Great Lake and a lighthouse. So it's not like I was, living along the shoreline and would just gaze out upon them on a daily basis. I had to make an effort. And even though we went to Lake Michigan as kids and high schoolers, it wasn't until the late 90s when I started working in the tourism industry that I really started to understand the history of lighthouses, why we needed them, particularly here in the Great Lakes region, and then started delving into stories about the keepers and their histories, their legacies. and, their misfortunes and their spirits that still hang on. So it's kind of funny. People ask me why I think lighthouses have so much of these tragedies and these ghost stories attached to them. And all of this is, these were remote jobs. These shorelines were not populated tourist towns like they are today. Many of them were on islands. They lived remotely. It was a dangerous job. Many of them lost their lives, some in tragic accidents related to the job, or as if you flip through the death in lighthouses on the Great Lakes, sometimes at the hands of others. There was a lot of wayward people who would commit crimes because these lighthouse keepers were so far removed from the communities, and it could potentially be, or was, I guess, a dangerous place to be in that regard. So I've gone down a lot of rabbit holes over the years in researching these lighthouses, and every step of the way I get more intrigued.
It's an interesting thing that you say about that, because when you really do stop and think about lighthouse keepers in particular, going back, I don't think it's the same way now, but I by no means know for sure. You can tell me one way or the other, but when you're talking back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, being a lighthouse keeper was not easy, right? It was a pretty harsh life. To your point, a lot of solitude, and I never really thought about the fact that by the fact of them being in solitude, so to speak, that could bring sorts of unsavory characters to do unsavory things to people. I've never really given that part much thought.
Well, and that's kind of where how this book developed. This is my second lighthouse book. The first one, which I think we'll talk about later in the season, is Michigan's Haunted Lighthouses. And that one was all about, the ghost stories. But there were some of the stories that are in the second book that are dark in nature, but don't necessarily have the paranormal element to it. And I've been a fan before it was cool, where everybody had a TV show and a podcast on true crime. I was watching Law and Order episode 1 before there were 5 spinoffs. I've always been interested in the history of crime, and this book allowed me to bring that along with my passion for lighthouses together and find stories that some of them, one of them dates back almost 200 years now. And they're all cold cases. I mean, where are you going to solve? How are you going to solve a crime in a remote lighthouse in 1820? You're not.
You're not. And how did you get to the point of it is one thing to be like, I like lighthouses. The other is like, I want to know how people died in lighthouses. I mean, how did you get there, Dianna?
Well, there's quite a few reports of, keepers who died during rescue attempts or traveling from one light to another. Their ships would go down, or their smaller boats would go down. So there was a lot of that. And that this book doesn't cover those kind of accidental deaths. Yeah. This one, there were a couple stories that I had researched for the first book that didn't quite have the haunted element, but they had interesting storylines about a keeper who died in a mysterious fire or whose body just disappeared. There are a couple stories in here related to suicide tied to the light itself. And so, or took place at a light. And so these are the stories that kind of branched out that were kind of rumbling around in my head. And I couldn't really find a place for them in the Haunted Lighthouse book. Plus, I already had that one at 13 chapters. And, if you're going to do lighthouse haunting things, you got to go just with 13 chapters, right? So I had all these extra stories to tell. And my publisher is not a fan of sequels. So I had to figure out a way to spin the stories in a little bit different way. And my publisher, the History Press, had a whole, I think it's called Mayhem and Murder. Is that the series? They have a whole series of books that fit into this category. And I thought, well, here I can write for a new section of their books, but still bring along my lighthouse stories. One of the things that I liked particularly about this book, is that it branches out not just in Michigan, but to the whole Great Lakes region. So I actually feel like I learned a lot more researching and writing this one, because many of the stories were new to me. I mean, my whole life has been focused in on Michigan stories and maybe a handful of Wisconsin ones along the Lake Michigan Circle Tour route. But this one allowed me to look at South Bass Island and Put in Bay and to go visit there. It allowed me to look at other places where I had not necessarily thought about stories. Now, I researched and wrote this during COVID, during the lockdown. So I couldn't really go to Canada to do a lot of that research. But I got to say, thank goodness for Facebook history groups out there that are willing to do the research for you and help you dig around, because that really helped add meat to the stories, particularly those in the Wisconsin area, or excuse me, the Canada.
Well, and I have to say, once again, the book is called Death and Lighthouses on the Great Lakes, A History of Murder and Misfortune, written by Dianna Stampfler. And before I go any further in this, I do want to let you all know that Dianna has her own website that you can get this book through. And, you know, that's the best way to get it, because you are directly helping the author, because all the other places are going to take their cuts. This is with her. You go to promotemichigan.com/books and get it. Can I get it autographed? Because I think mine's autographed. Yeah, mine's
autographed.
You know,
that's the other perk. You know, if Amazon is selling autographed copies, well, they're probably used. But you know, that's the thing too, is that you can order any of the books that I have. You can order autographed, personalized, and you know, it's not. I've already started Christmas shopping for this year, so it's not too early to start thinking about some of that as well. So
no, and you know what I really like about it, is what I really want to make sure that I got out here, is that, first of all, I love the design of this book. This is a very nice book, and you know, you were talking about, you know, the Great Lakes, and I love that you made a good reference for people to see where you're talking about, especially for those who may not be from the area. And I'm not going to put all this up on the screen, but this is really chock full of a lot of great photos, really nice photos, and very representative. And it looks like wherever you can, you're finding the photos of the people you're kind of talking about. So a really nice job on that. Was that hard to get all that reference material, to find it, to track it down?
Not so much. I mean, there are so much online now, which is really a great part of it. One of the great treasures that's in here is actually in chapter 1, where I'm talking about the Gibraltar Point Lighthouse on Toronto Island in Canada. And we actually went there after the book came out. But there is a letter in here from the earliest lighthouse keeper, and it's dated 1808. And it was, you know, just such an early letter, and the entire thing was archived online. I found it through, I think, a Reddit field. And so when you track down this stuff and then you reach out to the people that either post it there, I do a lot of work on ancestry.com. You'll see newspaper articles in here from newspapers.com or Find a Grave. And I find it really that people are willing to share their stories so you can help, and their photos, so you can help educate people. And so I am constantly emailing people going, hey, I'm doing research on this lighthouse. I have been dying to find a photo of this person. I see you posted one on Ancestry. You know, can you give me permission to use it? Here's what I want to do with it. And they've been great. There's also several resources. You know, the U.S. Coast Guard, the U.S. Lighthouse Society, they both are depositories of great resources of lighthouses and ships and keeper photos. And, you know, of course, the Coast Guard is national. So you have access to that. Library of Congress. And, you know, I grew up in a family full of historians, genealogists, and researchers. And so digging in and doing that part and trying to find access to all this stuff is really the fun part of it. And even this week, I've been working on some extended stories on some keepers that are new to me. And there's always something new showing up online that allows you to deepen your research. So you've got to keep going at it. Even though you say, oh, I've already researched this one. Well, maybe that was 10 years ago. There's a whole wealth of information out there. Facebook groups are another good one where you can find resources. Here in the state of Michigan, we have a website that has a lot of death certificates. And so being able to pull those up and reprint those where it documents, for example, I'm looking on page 125 of the book where it's George Genry's death record, noting that he died of an accidental drowning. That was the official cause of death. However, I think a lot of people in the Munising area up on Lake Superior question that he died accidentally. They think there's something more nefarious may have happened. And you can read about that in chapter 9.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. And it really just adds to the overall story. I mean, it's one thing to read all your wonderful words, but then that you're including these like reference pieces to it as well just makes this just really pretty stand out. I love that. I love that sort of thing too, and I love the fact that you're able to find that. And research is organic, isn't it? It never ends. And I think that's such a good point that you bring up, that you might have done something some time ago, but there's always something new to learn.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that I really wanted to do with this and with my first lighthouse book was I didn't want every chapter to be, here's the lighthouse and here's the keeper. I wanted these other assets in there. So, there in this book, we have a map that's from 1669 from Father Marquette that he drew. It's got the death records. It's got newspaper articles. Yes, it has photos of keepers and lighthouses, but it's also photos of boats and of graves and cemeteries. And so I really wanted to provide a variety of resources in terms of these photographs and documents so that it didn't get boring, so that it wasn't always just such a cookie cutter chapter. And, there are some of these that like newspaper articles, which are great because they validate to a certain degree the story that you're telling in your own words. Now, sometimes they're very contradictory because even back in the 1800s, the media didn't always get it right.
Yeah.
But you can deduce from that or compare different articles at different times and then use that to cross-reference to verify dates with, find a grave or with the death record. So it takes a lot of, when you're a true investigative journalist, you have multiple sources that will confirm the same data. And so having access to these various sites and these various pieces of information allows me to do that. That's not to say that there aren't a couple mistakes in there. I'm not sure if I found too many in this book, but I had a couple in the first book that I noticed after the fact. And, that drives me nuts. It really does. You prove it so many times, and yet you still find something spelled wrong or a date wrong. No. Especially when you throw off by a whole century. That kind of throws the whole story amok.
Well, and I'll tell you real fast before I head off the break here. I am famous for it because I have a lot of stuff, as we all do for our stuff, a lot of typing and stuff to prepare for my show. And normally I do not notice it's spelt wrong until it's out for everyone to see. So that's just kind of how I operate as well. Dianna, why don't we do this? Let's go ahead, take our first break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with author Dianna Stampfler. We're going to be talking about lighthouses. We're going to talk about some of the stories in the book. We have a lot to get to. Stick around. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Greg Bakun here. I've told you about the out-of-the-world roast beef sandwiches at Maverick's Real Roast Beef, but I haven't told you about their Philly steak sandwiches, turkey bacon avocado sandwich, BLT, crispy chicken, fish sandwiches, brisket, or pulled pork. Okay, you get the idea. They make a lot of delicious food to the same standard as their famous roast beef sandwiches, and now I'm starving. I'm going to go to Maverick's Real Roast Beef off Lexington and Roseville, and you need to go too. Check out their menu at mavericksbeef.com.
What if one day could open your heart, spark your spirit, and connect you to your most authentic self? That day is Saturday, August 23rd from 10 to 6 at the Litz Rocks Shops Woo Woo Festival at the Taylors Falls Memorial Community Center, located at 312 Government Street in Taylors Falls. Explore tarot, oracle, psychic, and mediumship readings. Listen to inspiring speakers covering fascinating metaphysical topics. Soak in the calm tones of live hand pan music. Shop handcrafted goods, crystals, metaphysical tools, books, and more. It's just $5 cash at the door as a free will offering. And remember, Taylors Falls is a destination. Come out for the festival and stay to explore the natural beauty, historic charm, and energy of this incredible town. And yes, there will be walking tacos.
The Let's Rock Shop's Woo Festival, Saturday, August 23rd from 10 to 6 at 312 Government Street, Taylors Falls Memorial Community Center. Just $5 at the door. Come for the woo, stay for the wonder, and the walking tacos.
Have you ever met someone who not only can help you on a deep spiritual level, but also potentially change your life? Refined Divine is an extremely gifted psychic medium who travels the nation and lives right here in the Midwest. And she offers mediumship, mentorship, house and business parties, energy healing, palm readings, and so much more. Refined Divine has helped thousands, and she can help you.
Hi, this is Psychic Medium Deb. I cannot wait to hear from you. You can go to refineddivinepsychic.com.
Greg Bakun here. I love historic tours of Minneapolis and seeing everything it has to offer. But if you know me, I like to include a little spooky in my tours, which is why I found the perfect combination. Minneapolis Trolley Tours does this amazing candlelight ghost tour that you have to check out. It's an extremely immersive experience. It's a trolley trip that starts out at a haunted mansion, traveling around Minneapolis locations exposing ghost stories that the public and business owners would rather left untold. Then a tour of the aforementioned haunted mansion where ghosts of past residents from the 1800s reside, plus a lot of surprises to discover. Next, experience Gertrude's After Hours. Did I mention Gertrude is the mansion's most famous ghost? Maybe she'll show up. And you finish up the tour at Gertrude's Lounge in the haunted basement of the mansion with refreshments and Q&A. The trolleys are climate controlled and the mansion is restored to perfection. Check out MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for more information. And welcome back to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. My name is Greg Bakun. Thank you so very much for joining us tonight. We are having quite the wonderful conversation. I'm really enjoying this, and we haven't really got too far into this yet. I have with me author Dianna Stampfler. We are talking about death and lighthouses on the Great Lakes, a history of murder and misfortune, part of the Murder and Mayhem series. And once again, if you want to pick up this book, and you might be like, well, I don't really think about lighthouses all that much. It's a good book, first of all. It's laid out very well, and I don't want to go and say I guarantee anything. But I guarantee that you're going to like this. I really am. And you can go over to promotemichigan.com /books. You can get the book. You can get it autographed. You can get whatever you want. But please support our authors. Support the work that they're putting into this. And this is a great book. And I appreciate, Dianna, that you sent this to me and the other one that we'll be talking about in a couple of months. Why don't we talk about some of the stories in the book? Is there one in particular that you'd like to kind of share with us?
Absolutely, and I'm going to pick this one not because it's in Michigan, but because it's a fascinating story, and it also has a little bit of a twist in it, in that it is tied to a female lighthouse keeper in Michigan.
Oh, okay.
And many people don't realize that there were a significant number of women, not just in Michigan or the Great Lakes, but across the country, who were lighthouse keepers. The lighthouse service, just as a kind of a background, established in the early 1800s. It was a political appointment in early years coming from the president himself. Mm-hmm. And so it was a government job. Oftentimes, the wife, if a male keeper died in the line of duty or died in general, often if the wife had been assisting off the books, she knew the job. And so she would apply for and get hired as the keeper. This was very common. We had about 50 women in Michigan, and I've been researching them for many years as well, who had that often, or sometimes it's a daughter of the head keeper or whatnot. A few instances where the woman got hired outright, but most cases it was the wife. And so that to me is one of the reasons that this particular story I'm going to kind of share with you fits in with me. And here's a side note on that. Okay, a trivia question for you, Greg. Okay, a lighthouse keeper, a male lighthouse keeper is tending a light. He's making $400 a year. He dies. His wife takes over the job. How much does she get paid?
Well, considering how it's unfair then and unfair now, she what $100 a year, something like that?
What if I told you she got paid the same?
I would be very impressed, actually.
I don't know what happened along the way in America, but in that era, the women, they paid for the position. They didn't pay for the gender. And so if a man was running that light, he was making $400 a year. He died. His wife came in. She makes $400 a year. Isn't that impressive?
That is actually, very much so.
Okay. So we're going to go to Escanaba, Michigan. There's a little bit of irony in this story that I'll tell you as we get through here. Escanaba is in northern Lake Michigan. It was a huge port town, cute little town. Go there probably usually at least once a summer. And they constructed a lighthouse and it got done in late 1867. So late in the season, they decided to hold off and put it into service the following May. So one of the cool pieces of art that I have, which is also in the book, is a notice to mariners that a new lighthouse is going to be here, because if they've got to let the ships know, hey, there's a new light you need to be on the lookout for, so that they understand where they're at. We don't have GPS back then.
Right.
So it's going to go into service on May 13th of 1868. They hire a man by the name of John Terry, who had worked for the railroad, to be the head keeper. Well, there was a problem in that he died in April before service began. So he never got a chance to work at the light. They offered the job to his wife, Mary. And so Mary Terry comes in May of 1868. She serves as the sole keeper. She never has an assistant, male or female. She handles all the jobs and responsibilities. If there are things that she needs help with, she hires somebody from town to come up and deal with it and then gets them out. Like, this is her light. She's good. And she does her faithful duty of this lighthouse for 18 years. She was a frugal woman. She made about $540 a year. So she was getting paid a little bit higher than some of the other keepers in the area. But she would sock some of her money away. She owned other land in Escanaba, which was kind of cool. And everything seemed to be going pretty well for her until March 5th. Of 1886. And early morning hours of that morning, the volunteer fire department gets a call, and they load up their horse-drawn fire wagon, and they all head off to the lighthouse because the lighthouse is burning. And this story I've known for 25 years. And so one of the things in doing added research for the book was I want to know, okay, what was the winter like? Like, did they encounter a lot of snow? Did they have trouble? Because the lighthouse was fully engulfed and it ended up being a loss of the building. Did they have trouble getting there? Was there so much snow? And so the National Weather Service actually has historical records about weather and determined that it was lower than average snowfall. There probably was snow on the ground, but there hadn't been a blizzard recently. There was nothing that should have prevented the fire department from getting there and putting that fire out. So as they extinguish that fire, they go looking for Mary Terry. Now, you would think in the middle of the night, she would be in her bedroom. Well, turns out they found what was left of her in the basement on the opposite corner of where her bedroom was. So catty corner from where her room was, 2 floors down. Okay. And there's very little left of her. She has burned up in the fire. Sorry, this is a little gruesome. And there are newspaper articles that run as far as California talking about this. And there was no actual inquisition, but there are a number of people in Escanaba that believe what happened that night was that some robber in town who knew she hoarded her money at the light kicked in the door of the basement, which is seen in many photographs. If you go in and look, even in the book on page 87, there's a photograph there. And they broke in the door. They kicked the door down to enter the light to rob her. Well, she heard this, and she went downstairs, confronted the intruder. There was a struggle, and she was murdered. And then the fire was started, not near the furnace where she joked for years that she might get burned out of the house because of the faulty furnace, but near that door. It was the intensity of the fire right there where her body was, as if the body was intentionally set on fire.
Wow.
And so these early newspaper articles talk about murder and robbery and murder as a possible cause of death for her. Now, one of the other things that they note in the articles are the reason that they're led to believe that someone kicked the door in is that after the fire was extinguished, they determined that the hinges on which the door once stood hadn't been burned off of the frame. The nails and such had been bent and ripped off, like someone had kicked it in.
Sure.
So these are the theories. There was never any, and no one ever arrested, no trial, no real investigation into it. They just deemed that she died in the fire. But of course, it's 1886 and in remote Upper Peninsula. So it's kind of, still, in my opinion, it's still an unsolved case. I still think that she likely died at the hands of someone else. And I know that there are several people in the UP who agree that she just didn't die in a fire. She was killed. And even Michigan History Magazine ran, I think probably 10, 12 years ago, maybe, a whole article about this case, about this burning. And it was the cover story. And so it's intrigued people for many, many years. And I don't think, certainly we're never going to know different. People will just have their opinions about what may or may not have happened to Mary Terry that day.
Well, and it seems like it's it's at such a spectacular level of the fire, right? I mean, that it's a complete loss. It just seems like a huge, huge amount of you wouldn't think of it as an accident. Maybe it wouldn't be as much. I don't know.
Right. This clearly, if it was a criminal, he's really not smart, because if you want to do this, you drag the body over by the furnace and start the furnace on fire. I think about these things. Really, how do you get away with the crime, right?
Yeah.
But of course, when you're in the middle of it all and you're just trying to get the heck out of there, her money was still found in the lighthouse, because clearly after the guys murdered her and started the fire, he's not going to go looking for the money still, right? He's getting the heck out of there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so there's that interesting story. And there are, I had always heard that this lighthouse was also haunted, but when I contacted the Historical Society, they did not want me or did not acknowledge that. And so this was one of the stories that actually got pulled from the first book and led to the publication of this secondary title. Now
the picture on page 87 of the lighthouse, is that the rebuilt lighthouse?
It is.
Okay.
Yep. But that's the door that I was referring to. So, the lighthouse is brick. So it was, the interior part, the floors and the walls inside were burned. The exterior was not. This did change its appearance over the years because it became a Coast Guard life-saving station or a Coast Guard station. So I think they took the top of the tower off. They changed it up. And then when the Delta County Historical Society got a hold of it in more recent years, they had the original blueprints and they went back and restored it back to its original state. It is a museum. It is open for tours. You can climb the tower. You can go in and see Mary Terry's bedroom. And then we don't know exactly where she's buried, but John Terry is buried at a cemetery in Escanaba. And when I was up there, I can't remember if it was last summer or the summer before, I actually went with all of my books, whether they're haunted or these true crime, when I'm doing research and just lighthouse keepers in general. I'm not lost on the fact that without their stories, I have nothing to share.
Right.
And so I'm very thankful for them and for their service and for those that lost their lives. And so I really make a point to go to the cemeteries whenever I can to pay my respects and, just to have that few moments in time to be with them and to thank them for their service. So.
I think that's really kind. And I also think that it's an equal energy exchange as well, because you are giving new life. Forgive the terminology, but I think you'll appreciate what I'm saying is that you're giving new exposure to Mary Terry, especially and everyone else that would probably otherwise then not either be forgotten or not have the same breadth of people having knowledge of these folks. And whether or not she was killed or if it was an accident, I tend to believe you personally. I think I'm going with what you're saying as well. It's better. I mean, you're giving them the lens. You're giving them some exposure, and I think that's amazing as well. So
yeah, and these, it's kind of interesting. I would like to, you ever have people go there, like if you had 5 people you could meet in your lifetime, and ask them one question, dead or alive, like who would that be? And I would like to, ask her, like, what happened that night, like.
Absolutely.
How did your life come to an end? These are questions that I would like to know the answers to.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead, take our next break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Dianna Stampfler. We are talking about the book Death and Lighthouses on the Great Lakes, A History of Murder and Misfortune. Stick around. We are going to take a break. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Greg Bakun here. I love historic tours of Minneapolis and seeing everything it has to offer. But if you know me, I like to include a little spooky in my tours, which is why I found the perfect combination. Minneapolis Trolley Tours does this amazing candlelight ghost tour that you have to check out. It's an extremely immersive experience. It's a trolley trip that starts out at a haunted mansion, traveling around Minneapolis locations exposing ghost stories that the public and business owners would rather left untold. Then a tour of the aforementioned haunted mansion where ghosts of past residents from the 1800s reside, plus a lot of surprises to discover. Next, experience Gertrude's After Hours. Did I mention Gertrude is the mansion's most famous ghost? Maybe she'll show up. And you finish up the tour at Gertrude's Lounge in the haunted basement of the mansion with refreshments and Q&A. The trolleys are climate controlled and the mansion is restored to perfection. Check out MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for more information. This Wednesday on GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun, tune in for one-question readings with the highly acclaimed psychic medium, Refined Divine, who can answer questions about love, life, and connecting with past loved ones. Get a potentially life-changing reading by calling.
I can answer the question I've had all my life.
Delve into the exceptional talents of Refined Divine at refinedivine.com and experience her live Wednesday at 10 p.m. for psychic medium Refined Divine on GhostBox Radio. Greg Bakun here. Like you, I love good, fresh, delicious food. So I want to tell you about this treasure in Roseville called Maverick's Real Roast Beef. Maverick's has the best roast beef sandwiches I've ever had, made fresh every order. Add fries or onion rings dropped in the fryer when ordered, and you have a winning combination. Maverick's Real Roast Beef has a lot more than roast beef, so check out their website, mavericksbeef.com, or check out their restaurant on Lexington in Roseville.
Madison Comic and Pop Culture Expo comes to the Alliant Energy Center August 9th and 10th. Madison Comic and Pop Culture Expo is a celebration of comics, toys, TV, film, art, cosplay, games, and all things nerdy. It's also a family-friendly event where you can meet your favorite celebrities, browse the vendor hall and artist alley for all the coolest merch, watch celebrity Q&As, and even more. Madison Comic and Pop Culture Expo, also known as MadX, is going to be huge, with guests like Walter Jones from the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, legendary wrestler Sting, plus other great guests from voice actors, authors, and artists all over the entire weekend. 2 days of action-packed fun at the Alliant Energy Center. Tickets start at $53. Kids tickets are just $9.99 for the entire weekend. Don't wait to get your tickets. Buy your tickets and get more information at MadisonComicExpo.com. MadX is Wisconsin's biggest Comic-Con, and don't forget Twin Cities Con is coming up in November. New guests are being announced all the time. Go to TwinCitiesCon.com for more information.
And join me tomorrow on GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun. We are going to be doing one-question readings with psychic medium, Refined Divine. Deb will be joining us. You know how it works, that you send us your questions regarding love, relationships, job, money. It's a one question, and she's going to be able to give some guidance. It's always enjoyable to have her and her husband Dave on and join us. And you can call in, you can do it in the comments, whatever, but it is well worth putting your question forward. It's at no cost, and it's a great way to maybe get an answer to something that's been on your mind for a while. She also channels people, and she also channels pets. So you want to check that out for sure. We are having quite the conversation tonight. What a great conversation, actually, with author Dianna Stampfler. We're talking about her book, Death and Lighthouses on the Great Lakes, A History of Murder and Misfortune, part of the Murder and Mayhem series. And I want to remind folks, you can pick up this book. You can pick it up at promotemichigan.com/books. It's important that, there's other places you can get it, but this is going to directly it will benefit Dianna, and she's the one to put all the work into it. And you can get it autographed, you can get it inscribed, whatever you want. But go to promotemichigan.com/books. And Dianna, as I was saying between the breaks here, that I am really enjoying this. And I know you. Can you share one more story with us?
Oh, absolutely. And these stories are so fun. I love being able to kind of get people excited about death, right? But whatever. So the next story we're going to go into is about South Bass Island Lighthouse, which is on South Bass Island in Lake Erie at Put-in-Bay, Ohio. And just a little backstory on this one. Again, as I mentioned in the first segment, I did a lot of my research on this during the lockdown, early days of the pandemic. Well, we ended up getting a chance to go to Put-in-Bay, which I'd always wanted to go down there. And we walked the grounds around the lighthouse. We couldn't go through the light. It wasn't open, but the grounds were open. And this site is where not one, not two, but 3 lighthouse keepers died under interesting circumstances.
Oh, wow.
Over the course of about 70 years. And so we did that. And then I went back down to Ohio a couple weeks later. And the lighthouse there is actually owned by Ohio State University. I think it's the only lighthouse owned by a university. Well, they have all of these keepers logs and data and photos and research and stories about the instances with these 3 lighthouse keepers. And so, you know how you watch on TV when people do research and they get the white gloves and you can't take your bag in and you got to have a pencil. And so it was like that. And wow. I mean, if you're a researcher, you get geeked about stuff like this.
Absolutely.
Right?
Very much so.
And so, you could take pictures of whatever I wanted. So literally I'm just loading up my phone with photos. And then I go back and I start digging into more of this story through my other sources like Ancestry and newspapers.com and things along those lines. And so this one, I think, really hit home because I got to do so much hands-on research myself. So the keeper we're going to talk about, there's 2 tied together really. So Harry Riley is the keeper. He is the first keeper of the lighthouse when it was put into service in the late 1890s. He had worked on a lighthouse tender called the Hayes before that. And the tender was what went around to all the lighthouses in a region and delivered supplies. Mm-hmm. So he had done that. But after 11 years of that, he requested to be transferred to a lighthouse, thinking it would be a little bit more suitable. So him and his wife move into the light. I don't believe they ever had any children. And shortly after they get there, he actually hires an assistant, kind of not really an official assistant through the lighthouse service, but he hires a guy who's going to help him out at the light. And he lets the guy live in the basement. He's an African-American man who lived on the island and also worked at the Victory Hotel. And his name was Sam Anderson. And he allows Sam to move into the basement of the lighthouse with his pets. Now, normally you'd say, okay, that's not such a bad thing. Well, Sam's pets were snakes.
Oh, goodness.
So there's that, which would have been like an absolute no-no for me. So within just less than a month after Sam starts working, his body is found at the bottom of the rock. So South Bass Island Lighthouse sits way up on a bluff, and it's all like rocks all around the bottom of it. Well, they find Sam's body down there, like he's been thrown.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
Perhaps fell, but he's pretty far down there. So he gets buried. They end up getting his 3 weeks pay, which pays for the burial of him in a pauper's grave at the cemetery on South Bass Island, which now has the driveway over it, which is interesting on its own.
Yeah.
But within 24 hours of Sam's death, the lighthouse keeper's missing. The head guy, Harry's missing. Well, they find him on the mainland, and he is walking up and down the streets of town, squawking about how he has the fastest horse in town, and he is challenging anybody who will listen to meet him at the fairgrounds for a horse race. And his wife finds out that he gets arrested for this because he's causing a nuisance. They get word to his wife. His wife's basically like, he's your problem now. So clearly it makes me think she's probably had issues with him in the past, right? Yep. So he gets sent to jail, and the judge comes in, and he ultimately gets sent to the asylum in Toledo. They say he's gone insane. He's gone mad. And so to find all these newspaper articles with headlines about how he's gone mad was really kind of interesting. And in that box at Ohio State, they had copies of the letters from the asylum, like the clinical diagnosis. This guy is incurably insane, and they're sticking him in the institution. And like all of these documents, which was just so incredibly fascinating to look at, because mostly that stuff from asylums is, today that's HIPAA stuff. You wouldn't even get access to it.
Absolutely.
So he gets sent to the asylum, and like 6 months later, this is in September of 1897, I think, or 98. 6 months later, he actually dies in the asylum and is buried somewhere in an unmarked grave, likely at the property. So when I was down at Ohio State, I went down to the site of the former asylum, which is now mental health. And I got to walk through the cemetery where they don't know where he's at, but like to go through some of that. And they have a tiny little museum in there. So I got to go through some of that. And I was doing research, and it brought me to a listing on a Facebook page or a group dedicated to the cemeteries at the asylum. And I found a reference in there, which I found quite interesting. And it gives the backstory kind of how, why Harry left the tender to start working at a lighthouse, and why he hired Sam Anderson to help with menial tasks at the lighthouse. He was losing his capacity. Harry Riley was going mad, and the cause of it was syphilis of the brain.
Okay.
So, what killed Capone in his 40s. So somehow along the course of his life, Harry Riley contracted syphilis. His wife maybe didn't know that, and he probably didn't know what it was, but he knew that his brain was going to mush. She was having continued problems with him, which is why she said, keep him, send him to jail. Mm-hmm. And he just diminished that quickly. In 6 months, he was gone. And so they, that was kind of an interesting thing to uncover. Now, the question remains, did he kill Sam Anderson? Because Sam Anderson had been, the night before he died, had been squawking and running around the island screaming that he didn't want to die. Well, there was a smallpox pandemic going on at the time on the island and throughout Ohio, which was interesting, again, doing the research during a COVID pandemic about another pandemic.
Right.
The irony was there. And so they deemed Sam's death on the death records as suicide. But why would a man who is screaming not to die of smallpox commit suicide?
Right.
Did Riley, in his diminished capacity, push Sam off the edge? Is that why he initially left the island still in his confused and erratic state, which led to his arrest and incarceration in the asylum? Is that all tied together? Right? It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So fast forward to 1911. So this happened in the last part of the 1800s. So we're looking at maybe a dozen years later. And a new lighthouse keeper by the name of Charles Dugan is there. He's the keeper. He comes in 1911, and he's there until 1925. And he died in almost the exact same spot that Sam Anderson did. His body found on the bottom of the rocks.
Wow.
Now he'd been a keeper there for 14 years. He'd been walking that path between town and between the lighthouse and his friend's house down the coast. Why this one time did he slip and fall? Like, you have to intentionally be climbing on rocks to fall down here.
Wow.
So I didn't set out to get a ghost story in this one, but perhaps the ghost of Harry Riley or the ghost of Sam Anderson, or the two of them together, or I don't know. Is that how Charles Dugan came to his end? It's just kind of ironic. But 3 men at that lighthouse, all dying under very dark circumstances.
Now, did Dugan look like he was thrown like the first person was?
I don't think that they ever indicated that. He was just down on the rocks. But my question on that is why? Why would, after dark, why would the keeper, who is very familiar with his property and the dangers associated with being near the shore, why would he be down there?
That's incredible. I mean, and that's just it. I mean, I was just curious, but it doesn't really matter, because just the fact that you had two like that, that's incredible. And I said early on, I'm not great with names. The one who ended up being contained, when they found him wanting to race horses, and we have about 3 minutes left. When he was found wanting to race horses, did he remember that he worked at a lighthouse? I mean, was it like just like that, where it just like everything went away?
They never really specified all of that. He just kept talking about the horse racing. Yeah. And the funny thing is he didn't even own a horse.
What was he gonna race?
He is just totally out of that whole thing. And so, on that one, in doing some of the photos, I got a chance to find. I'm a collect vintage postcards as well. So. Mm-hmm. I found a vintage postcard of the men's ward at the asylum. Now, I'm not sure exactly where he was held. But it's a possibility that he was at that men's ward. So, but yeah, his story was incredibly fascinating. And there were other people who had done quite a bit of research on his death. And so one of them worked for the FBI. So I got a chance to email this retired FBI agent who was like just personally intrigued by the story. And there's just that's the thing, talking with you. I mean, there are so many people out there who are following these true crime stories, these historic true crime stories. They're writing about them. They're talking about them, whether they have a ghost story attached to them or not. It's just a different element of history. And I've been actually doing some significant international research really on dark tourism and the rise of that globally. How many people travel, there's like 12 companies in London doing Jack the Ripper tours, right? Because that's such a interesting thing. And people, they're going to sites of wars and all kinds of other stuff. So I know I'm not alone, so I don't feel quite as freaky about it as I once did, because there's a lot of us out there that follow into this world. And people say, aren't you afraid people are going to think you're a serial killer? And I'm like, no, I research it so I can watch for warning signs in case it's around me. It makes me more intuitive about the whole thing.
Well, and that's just it too, is that's the purpose of my show, and it's the purpose of a lot of other people's stuff too, is that we are curious, and there is a morbid fascination with with this stuff, but I always think the ones who are like, oh, how could you be interested in that? I think they're a lot more interested than probably we are, and they're just too ashamed to say it, quite frankly.
Absolutely.
Once again, the book is called Death and Lighthouses on the Great Lakes, A History of Murder and Misfortune. It is available if you go over to promotemichigan.com/books. That way you can get a signed copy and support the author. Dianna, this has been fantastic. I hope people seriously check out this book. It is very, very good. And it's been a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. Looking forward to talking to you this fall.
We are definitely going to do that, folks. Check it out tomorrow. We have Psychic Medium, Refined Divine. Everyone, have a great night.